the name of Islam in their names, and they mostly, again, kill Muslims. In today's world, unfortunately, the cheapest thing that can be found is the life or the blood of Muslims. 1 million Syrian brothers are losing their lives under barrel bombs, and for some they are only statistics. The tragedy suffered by children in Yemen who are starving is not cared about by anyone except for a few countries and institutions. Children are being killed when they're playing football in Gaza, but their cries are not heard by any organization, including the UN Security Council. From Somalia to Afghanistan, to Arakan, to Turkestan, to Libya, everywhere you look, you see similar tragedies being suffered. When it is Muslims, those who die, those who suffer, are not seen as lives, but unfortunately just as photos. Brothers and sisters, of course, since we have a double standard, it is partially due to the failure of organizations like the UN Security Council, which fail in upholding peace and stability. They are taking decisions for the interests of 5 permanent members rather than upholding peace and fairness globally. The fate of all humanity, including the Muslim world, is abandoned to the will of 5 countries. The Muslim world does not have the right to take decisions and to apply them on its own future. The permanent members of UN Security Council, among the 5 members, there is no country which has a Muslim population. This unfair system was established by the winners of the Second World War, and this system cannot continue eternally. International security architecture must be reorganized based on the needs of today, which is no longer a choice, but rather a necessity. As Ömer said, justice is the basis of state. No order which looks out for the powerful rather than the righteous cannot produce peace and stability under any condition. As Turkey, we always make a call that the world is bigger than 5. And these are the facts which lie behind our call. International community must now face such facts. Every single day that we fail to take a step, global unfairness will deepen, conflicts will increase, and the world will continue struggling with wars. 5 permanent members and 15 non-permanent members. Among the 15 non-permanent members, there are maybe a couple countries whose populations are Muslim, but we should not be deceived by this picture. At the UN Security Council, the non-permanent member has no will or has no say. Everything depends on the 5 permanent members, or actually among the 5, just one of them. Whatever they desire happens, and nothing else does. So we should not fool ourselves. We must first have self-confidence. The organization that you see here is no ordinary organization. As the OIC and as the COMCEC, we must be aware of our own strength, and we must first know ourselves. And we must design our stance accordingly. In Bosnia, Rwanda, Iraq, and today in our neighbor Syria, in Palestine, and in Myanmar, suffering was not solved by the UN, and such a UN cannot produce solutions for the problems of humanity. So once again, I would like to reiterate my call that the structure of the UN Security Council must be updated based on the geographical and religious distribution of global population. And I invite you to support this call. Esteemed guests, this situation increases the burden of all of us. Muslims have to defend justice and fairness and peace under any circumstance. When we see an evil taking place, we are supposed to correct it with our hands or with our tongues, or we are required to object to it in our hearts. This is what God orders us to do in our holy book. Our God orders us to uphold justice, good, fairness, and helping each other. It also forbids us from evil and from injustice. This order is quite obvious, and no one which ignores this order can serve Muslims. So when the oppression is happening all around us, we cannot act like nothing is happening. When we witness injustice, we cannot watch it from a distance like others do. We cannot be angry at the darkness or help foreigners to come and help, but we need to light a candle which will pierce that darkness. Like the ant who was carrying water to the fire into which Abraham was thrown. With everything we have got, we need to struggle to eliminate injustices. Then, if we do not fulfill our duties, when the day of judgment comes, we cannot account for our actions. As long as there is oppression, there will be people who fight for justice, who are doing their best in order to protect justice. As Muslims in the 21st century, we have to be the advocates of justice. We, as the Muslim countries, as Muslims who are believers of the religion of peace, we need to not fight with each other, because in that case we deepen the suffering of the oppressed who are hoping for our help. We should not leave brotherhood at a discourse level only, but we must also cooperate on a technical, commercial, economic, cultural, and social levels. We must employ our institutions, organizations in the best and most effective way possible. We must first be aware of our own power, our own capacity and potential. The OIC is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and this is one of the instruments that we have. The organization has 56 members and 5 observing members, and after the UN, it is the second largest international organization. Turkey has been active in the activities of the organization since the day it was founded, and it's made a serious effort in order to make the organization more active, especially during our term chairmanship, we made a lot of effort and we acted in a mentality of liability in order to answer the needs of the Muslim world. When there were attacks carried out against the legal status of Jerusalem, we acted swiftly and organized two extraordinary summits in December 2017 and May 2018. We made our reaction to the attacks and the oppression that was targeting Jerusalem. We raised our voice from Istanbul as the OIC, and we also took the issue to the UN General Assembly sessions. The decisions that we took at the summit were also approved by the international community and its conscience. So I'd like to underline one fact once again. Any oppression which is not reacted against only encourages the oppressor further. The Palestinians are struggling for their lives and for their properties, but Israel does not respect this and is jeopardizing the future of the whole region's security. Jerusalem is the center of all three religions, and by trying to turn it into the center of only their belief, they're making a mistake. Western countries are encouraging Israel, knowingly or unknowingly, but this only boosts oppression. At every platform possible, we defend the rights of our Palestinian brothers. Islamophobia and xenophobia are on the rise, especially in Western countries, and is spreading like an epidemic. Every day, offices or workplaces of Muslims or women walking on the street are targeted by hatred crime. At the discourse level, they defend democracy and human rights, but they are keeping silence when immigrants and Muslims are being targeted in their own land. When there are attacks against our Prophet, unfortunately, this is called freedom of speech. And racist oppression, which sometimes take lives of some of our citizens, are being ignored. In the face of such attacks, we need to put out a joint stance. Unfortunately, otherwise, the Muslim diaspora will face an even darker future. When we were the term president of OIC, after 52 Muslims lost their lives in the attack in Christchurch, we took certain steps. Based on the significance of the issue, as the term president, we invited the extraordinary committee for a meeting. We passed a declaration after the summit, and we made a call that 15th of March would be declared as the International Solidarity Day against Islamophobia. At the Muslim world and in the international community, we made a lot of efforts to raise this topic. We invited the UN General Assembly to a meeting, and we led the passing of such a decision. When we were taking over the term presidency in 2016, we emphasized certain topics and we set for ourselves concrete goals in some issues. The 12th 10-year action plan was accepted with our term presidency, and we laid the foundations for some very important mechanisms, which include youth strategy, women's council, intermediation, contact group, a Red Crescent network, a police cooperation and coordination center. During our term presidency, we received support from all member countries who answered our calls and who took up responsibility. And I would like to thank them on behalf of my country. I would like to wish success to Saudi Arabia, which took over the term presidency until 2021. I would like to also thank Secretary General for their contribution to our joint cause. And I will have to leave in order to meet the Iraqi head of state. Thank you.